True story. The first Sylvester Stallone movie that I ever saw was Over the Top. I was something like 5 years old watching the Canadian version of HBO First Choice when onto the screen came this elaborately muscled, oiled up god of a man that I would learn later on was Sylvester Stallone. As a 5-year-old, I have to say, I was blown away by his presence, and the fact that it was a movie about arm wrestling, I thought was the coolest thing ever. I mean, me and my friends were obsessed with this film. We used to turn our baseball caps around on our heads, and pretend we were Lincoln Hawk and arm wrestle all day long. I never won once. I even had an over-the-top action figure that had a dial on the back that would turn Lincoln Hawk's arm around as if he was arm wrestling. So this movie holds a special place in my heart, even though I can look at it as perhaps a product of its time in ways both good and bad. But in 1987, where was Sylvester Stallone? Well, he was coming off of two of the biggest hits of his career, Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rocky IV, and the year before, in 1986, he had done the movie Cobra, which was the first time he teamed with Canon Pictures. Canon Pictures, for those of you that don't know, was run by the Israeli cousins Monahan Golan and Yoram Globus. And if you're a fan of 80s movies, you've no doubt come across that iconic Canon Films logo. I always loved the music for it. Boom, boom, boom. They were the undisputed kings of 80s B action flicks, with Chuck Norris, Michael Dudikoff, and Sho Kosugi and so many others part of their stable. When I was a kid, Canon Films meant ninjas, breakdancing, Chuck Norris, Stallone, and all the things that I love. In the mid to late 80s, Canon Films really had their eyes on a bigger prize than just being the B-movie kings. You see, they wanted to become the next Warner Brothers. And to that end, they signed huge financial deals with some of the biggest stars in Hollywood, including, of course, Sylvester Stallone, because they simply didn't come much bigger than him. Their first film together was Cobra, which was not a typical Canon movie. Yes, it was definitely an R-rated B action flick, but it had a huge budget, $25 million. And indeed, it was a co-production with a major studio, Warner Brothers.
The disease, and I'm the cure.
It was meant to be a blockbuster, and indeed was a financial success, grossing $48 million at the domestic box office, and about twice that domestically. But it was considered a mild disappointment because Marion Cobretti simply did not become the next Rambo. Even still, Canon had to be happy. It was one of the biggest hits they'd ever had. And they doubled down on Sly, offering him the highest salary ever paid to a movie star at the time, $12 million, to star in Over the Top.
Can't believe everything you hear.
Based on a script by Gary Conway and David Engelbach, the film was pitched as a low-key, character-driven drama with the lead earmarked for a guy like Don Johnson. The story of a man trying to win back his estranged son once Sterling Sylvan, the writer of In the Heat of the Night, Poseidon Adventure, Towering Inferno, and 1976's King Kong was brought in, it was pumped up to become an epic, Rocky-esque tale, instead of boxing, of course, arm wrestling. So who else could they bring on board but Sylvester Stallone? Well, in the years since, Stallone has kind of downplayed his contribution to the movie, saying that he did it for the money because the salary was insane. The movie really does have all the earmarks of a true Stallone classic, namely the verisimilitude. People have knocked the movie as a Rocky clone with arm wrestling, and sure enough it is to some extent. But Stallone as a co-writer really does take us into the world of arm wrestling, and I think that at the time people didn't consider it a realistic depiction, but it was loosely based on the career of a real trucker class champ named John Brezik. Now to be sure, the adversary's Lincoln Hawk, the character that Stallone plays, face don't look much like actual arm wrestlers, although some of them are the real deal. They're all bodybuilders that are straight out of Gold's Gym and wrestlers. They look like something out of a comic book with the late Rick Zimwalt, the main adversary, Bull Hurley. But a funny thing happened. Over the Top didn't start out as realistic, and many people made fun of it in 1987 for not being realistic at all. But it became realistic over time. The movie was so influential on arm wrestling that if you happen upon an arm wrestling championship on ESPN, it looks like Over the Top. I mean, it's mostly in Vegas. Everybody's way over the top to, put a cap on it. And it really does look like the arm wrestlers that are doing it now were all massive fans of Over the Top and patting their careers on it. Over the Top almost seems like a documentary now when compared to arm wrestling, how it really is. So that's pretty amazing. Now, Monahan Golan, who ran Canon Pictures, wound up directing the movie. Now, does this sound like a terrible idea to you? Actually not that bad of an idea, because you see, he had already directed the Delta Force and was a relatively accomplished director of action films at the time. He had also done Enter the Ninja and a bunch of movies in Israel that were actually fairly well received, such as Operation Thunderbolt. Heavily based on the Rocky films, it's very much an MTV-inspired tale with a lot of, Stallone's hallmarks all over it, making me wonder if he kind of took over in the editing room. It also has a constant rock soundtrack, including a big hit song by Kenny Loggins, Meet Me Halfway, which I loved, and of course Sammy Hagar's Winner Takes It All, Winner Takes It All, plus stylized visuals and a magnificently greased up Sylvester Stallone throughout. But there's more to Over the Top than meets the eye. For one thing, one of the things that always made Sly different than any of the other action stars that we grew up with in the 80s was the fact that while he was tough, muscle-bound, and badass, he was also vulnerable. Over the Top, while arguably cheesy and melodramatic in some ways, tells a solid father and son story that resonated with me when I was a kid.
Like, I'm just a father who messed up pretty bad, I know that. I've done things real wrong. Now I want to try to fix everything up as best I can.
Mostly because as tough as Lincoln Hawk is, you can tell he legitimately loves his child and is not above being emotional or vulnerable. Lincoln Hawk is an eminently human character. He's a deadbeat dad in some ways, pushed away by his overbearing father-in-law played by the legendary Robert Loggia. That's right, R-O-B-E. No, I'm not going to do the whole thing. He allowed the old man and his money to put a wedge between him and his wife, played by Susan Blakely, and took off rather than fight. Yet, like many of us, he's trying to do better, and when his wife becomes terminally ill, he becomes determined to step up and do the right thing. While it's too late to repair his marriage, it's not too late to establish a bond with his kid, Michael, even if he is a bit of a brat when it begins. A military academy kid, Michael worships his grandfather and despises his dad, who he thinks is a low-down drug dealer.
This truck is disgusting.
Luckily, all it takes is some badass arm wrestling lessons and learning how to drive a truck to sort him out. The best scene, and one that made an impression on me as a kid, was when Michael arm wrestles a kid in the dive. He loses and starts to cry, but his dad sets him straight.
I know you can win, but even if you don't, so what? So you lose. As long as you lose like a winner, it doesn't matter, because you did it with dignity.
Winning and losing isn't important. It's taking your victories and failings as a man and giving it real effort that matters. Once he gives the arm wrestling his all and turns around his hat, that's key, he wins. Boom. Done. As much as Sly himself has dissed the movie over the years, it is a great slice of 80s nostalgia. I always had a real soft spot for it, and you can tell that a lot of the dialogue must come straight from Sly, namely the great quote, "The world meets nobody halfway."
The world meets nobody halfway. Do you understand what that means? If you want it, Mike, you gotta take it.
Truer words have never been spoken. Sly, even if he knew he was making something a little cheesy, throws himself into the movie and makes arm wrestling look incredibly badass. Canon hoped this would be a huge hit and marketed a line of Lincoln Hawk toys. I even owned one. It had a dial in the back to make his arm move, as I mentioned earlier. There were also arm wrestling sets, and every kid that saw the movie in the 80s immediately went out and arm wrestled all their friends. Again, I never won. Not once. The movie itself, though, despite all the hype and the kids that loved it, was a hopeless flop at the box office. This was even though the fact that Canon had launched a marketing bonanza for it, including a few music videos, one of which, of course, was for Sammy Hagar's Winner Takes It All, which ends with him arm wrestling and winning against Stallone. The Kenny Loggins track, Meet Me Halfway, went on to become kind of a classic and hit number 11 on the charts, but the movie simply cratered at the box office, earning a measly $11.5 million in North America. Hugely embarrassing for Stallone because he had gotten paid $12 million to be in it. One has to assume that VHS rentals were brisk, however, and it became a constant staple of cable TV on the 80s and 90s. And sure enough, since then, it must have made a ton of money because I think it's considered quite a popular library title for Canon and for Warner Brothers. The film being a flop, of course, didn't really hurt Sly's career too much, although it did take a hit. The next year, Rambo 3 would be a modest box office disappointment, with Tango and Cash his only real hit until a major comeback in 1993 with Rennie Harlin's Cliffhanger. For Canon, it was one of three would-be 1987 blockbusters that crashed and burned, with the others being Masters of the Universe and Superman 4: The Quest for Peace.
Destroy Superman.
Later. He's a little bit anxious.
By the decade's end, they would again be out of business, and Golan never directed another film that was on the level of Over the Top again. Despite being a flop and Sly's apparently low opinion of it, to me Over the Top is a classic, as it was my introduction to the man and holds a special place in my Sly fandom. I give it about a 9 out of 10 Stallones. Is it perfect? No, but it's also pretty damn good despite everyone telling you differently. Without Sly, it probably wouldn't have been any good at all, but he gives it a soul, and you know what? I love this movie.
There will be nobody halfway. If you want it, you gotta take it. You weren't talking about me. You were talking about yourself, weren't you?
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joe Blow was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.